Hello everybody, my name is Jim. Welcome to the Tradesman channel. If you're new here, welcome back if you're not new here. So a lot of times we're working on projects that we just have to get done. We don't get to do a lot of fun stuff just for the hell of doing it. This is going to be one of those times that we're just doing something just for the hell of doing it. So we're going to be making a bow, a self bow out of shagbark hickory. So stay tuned, hope you enjoy it, and I'll catch you on the other side of it. So here's what you need to build one of these things. Now, there's nothing fancy here. You don't need a single power tool to do this. A little bit of elbow grease, a little bit of time, and you can build a nice one pretty easily. Just take your time. So I have a few different style of hatchets here. I've got a big heavy old Snow and Neely that has a pretty sharp bevel on it. This I like to use to remove a lot of material quickly. I have a hewing style, so it's all flat down that way. Blade's a little bit chipped up, you know, just from years of somebody leaving it on a dirt floor and that whole backside got pitted, so it's almost like serrated, but it still works awesome for getting in there a little bit tighter. Good old-fashioned Collins Boy Scout hatchet. These are nice, and they got a good head weight on them. They work well, easy to maneuver. So I have one of the draw knives that I made. Now this is too sharp to do any of the finish work on it. It bites into the wood too deep even if you cut with it beveled down. But this is nice if you want to remove a lot of material really fast when you're roughing out. This draw knife's a little bit duller. It's not dull, but it doesn't have that razor edge on there that one has. And what I use this one for is when we get a little bit closer, we can kind of shave down without removing too much material. So I have an assortment of cabinet scrapers. It's nice to have them, especially if you can get some of the curved ones. You can do different shapes and profiles. A couple of squeeze clamps. If you do not have a shaving horse or a bench vise, you can actually just use these to put it onto your workbench, clamp it down really tight. Tape measure, chalk box. Also, I'm not sure the name of this, I can never remember, but they use this in stitching boots to boot soles. It doesn't stretch, it's already waxed, and what we can do with that is we can make a string for tailoring. It actually can make good bowstring out of that. This stuff does not stretch at all. That's what you're looking for. You don't want to use 550 cord because a lot of times it's going to stretch on you over time. You may not get that accurate tailoring. And obviously, when you go to get into this, we'll try to get a close-up of this, but you definitely want to have some kind of a design in mind. Write it out, write your measurements out, and that's what you really need to get going. Now, I guess probably the next most important thing would be bow staves. I've got a few here. I'll show you what we're working with and the difference between some of them. All right, so let's get into our bow staves, what we're actually doing here. So I have a few different bow staves on the table and three different species actually. So on the outside here we have two shagbark hickory bow staves. They're in various states of readiness to go to actually be used. Right here we have a hunk of Osage orange. We have smoothbark hickory. Some places they call it bitternut hickory. And then we have, this is enough for two bows right here out of this shagbark hickory. Now first things first, you notice a major difference between the smoothbark hickory and the shagbark hickory bark. Obviously shagbark, as it gets older, it starts peeling off. Smooth bark, very smooth most of the life of the tree. And you also notice some differences in the sapwood versus the heartwood. Heartwood on this smooth bark's a lot thicker. It's a much thinner layer of sapwood on there. The stuff that's nice and springy. You get into the shagbark, totally different. Osage orange, it's different yet. Not a lot of sapwood on it. Osage is a very dense wood. It's a lot harder to work, but it's very prized for its properties for making bows. Well, what we're going to be doing for this series, we're going to be using one of these two shagbark hickory staves, and I'll get into which one I'm going to use and why I'm going to pick it. Alright, so let's get to the ones that we're going to use. This will be a later project. Obviously this one will be a later project. And this one will be a much later project. So what we have left We have this one right here that's pretty well ready to go. I could start shaping this. The only thing I don't like about this is I have a knot right here and it's off to one side. I'd rather have that kind of in the middle of the limb. So I'm probably going to set this one aside. Plus I want you to be able to see the process here for getting the back of the bow proper. So we have one here that's about halfway ready to go. All we have to do, we have to get the rest of this bark off right here, and we have to peel it down just to that first growth ring. So we're going to work on that on the shaving horse, and we're going to go from there. I mentioned earlier different sharpnesses in my draw knives. This one's real sharp. This one's pretty well razor sharp, and I don't really want to use it when I get down close to that outer growth ring layer, simply because you end up taking too much off and it's no good. But it is very nice for getting this rough bark. Now, a lot of times you can, you shave these down while they're still green. I don't like debarking stuff I'm going to work with later on for something like this, simply because sometimes it tends to dry out too fast and you develop bigger checks. But it is much easier to work doing it the other way. But this draw knife here, honestly, it's pretty easy to get this shaved down. So we have to get this outer layer off and this Cambrian layer off, or Cambion. Now I did the geometry on this draw knife so I could use it beveled down without it digging too deep. So it works best this way for me. The other draw knife we have, I can use it either way just fine. This one definitely likes to be bevel up. Now take your time with this. You don't want to go too deep, because if you do disturb that outer growth ring, you can get it back. I mean, you can make mistakes and get it back easy enough. That's why I always work on the back of the bow first. That way, once I have it where I want it, I'm not touching it again. And that's kind of important. Now we may end up backing this bow, I'm not sure yet. We'll find out as we go. If I do, it'll be with rawhide. But this knife is very sharp. You see, I'm still not even through the cambium layer yet. It actually has quite a ways to go. Now we're getting into it there. So once I get a little closer to that, I switch over to the duller knife. And like I said, it's not a dull knife. It's in good working order, but I don't have quite the same bevel on it that I do on that one. A lot easier to not mess up using this one. Now some of this cambium, you're not going to be able to get off. You're going to have little dips in there that you're going to have little tiny patches of it here and there, just because you're following the shape of the back of the bow, and that's okay, because you don't want to cut through the outer growth ring. And I'm going to stress that a lot, because that's one of the most important parts. And at the beginning, it's the most painstaking part. And what I'll do as I go, I just kind of start scraping it just a little bit, just enough to get rid of the majority of that cambium. So now that we have the back of the bow ready to work with, like I said, one continuous growth ring all the way through. We didn't chip down into it anywhere below that, which is perfect. You see a lot of these little brown streaks. I didn't go deep in there because I didn't want to penetrate that growth ring. But so here's what's nice about this stave. It already has a little bit of a reflex in it, which is nice because that's going to make it shoot a little bit faster. and it's going to want to naturally bend back to that shape because hickory will take a set after a time of shooting it, but we're going to do some things to help kind of mitigate that. The other nice thing about this is we have no knots. I have one little pin knot on the edge over here. That should go away with our layout. Now, by the time we're all said and done, this should be about a 72-inch long bow. That's what we're going for. This stave is perfectly straight all the way through. I could not have asked for a better stave to do this with. So all we're going to do, we're going to take our chalk box, and I use a non-permanent chalk. And I think my chalk box is saying they're not going to use anything on me. Oh, it's always something. Always something. Well, good thing we have a spare chalk box. We don't make anything worth a damn anymore. Well, we'll use our good old Tajima. Now this is an orange chalk in here. It's a little harder to see. This chalk line does a nice fine line. We get that centered best I can. This is nice because a lot of staves you can't really, it's hard to use a string line on them just because a lot of times they're just not straight enough. So we're going to get this centered on here best we can. Straight up. That's not bad at all. Not too bad. Now we must have a little bit of twist there, so let's do that one more time. Nice about this orange chalk, it wipes right off. I want to kind of get this a little bit over more towards the center here. Come over just a little bit. There we go, that's better. Straight up. And our line. So now that I have a center line, I'm just going to take and put a couple pencil marks on it, just so I know where I'm following in case I lose this line at all. Now, being as how this is a smaller stave, we may have to work with that just a little bit, but it should work just about right for what we want. Alright, let's see if we can see it here at all. Probably not very well. So I have all my measurements laid out, everything I want. I have my fades laid out, everything, the limbs, length. We have two views here. That's kind of what you'd see more in a mechanical drawing. That's going to help you a lot do what you need to do here, and you can kind of follow this along. What's nice too, when you draw them out, you make a couple of them, you can make adjustments. But if this is what works for you, you always have these measurements written down if you're good at saving this stuff, and I save everything. Like I said, this is the fun part. Now, maybe I didn't say that, but for me, this is the fun part. I enjoy doing this part of it. I think it's relaxing. You kind of get to see what shape you're going to end up with. So because this stave is so nice, I'm not worried about avoiding any knots. It's actually, like I said, it's just about the perfect bow stave. We're going to line this up with a finer pencil though. Alright, let's see. Let's see what we have for length. So we have 80 inches. Put a center mark at 40. Now at this point you have some decisions to make. What you want to be your top limb and what you would like to be your bottom limb. I don't think it really matters too much I kind of have a tendency to build things the way that the tree grows. So if I have a timber for a timber frame for a wall post, I'll stand that wall post up the way that the tree grew. I'll probably do the same thing here just because that's what I'm used to doing. So the plans that I drew for myself, they want about a 4-inch handle. And not a bad idea. Measure your hands, make sure it's comfortable. If that's not comfortable for you, you're not going to shoot it right. But a 4-inch handle is about perfect for me. Maybe we'll even go up just a little bit higher. Maybe 4, quarter inch either way. So give me just a little bit more room. So this isn't going to be a center shot bow, so we're going to have a little bit of a narrow handle. If we were doing a center shot, I would have a bit of a notch cut out of there, and we'll do one of those eventually, but right now we're first things first. So now that my handle's laid out where I want it, my drawing, my fade out, I'm going to go up another 2 inches. And all this can change a little bit as you're doing it. Come on, shaky hands, too much coffee. Make sure your marks are easy to see. From my fade out, you know we want 72 inches. Not from the fade out, but that's our bow center. So that's going to be what, 36 up. And 36 down from the center line. So that right there will give us a 6-foot long bow. Just what we want. Now we have a spot where we know we're going to trim to no matter what. So I'm going to find the center of this limb from the fade out. 32 3/4. And the 16 3/8. And I honestly don't think that this has to be terribly 31, so go 15 and a half. All right, so now we lay this out. I don't want this just to be a big rectangle up through here. So these points where we're actually going to string the bow, we're going to come up to, they're going to end up a 1/2 inch wide up here at the tip of the limbs, top and bottom. I'm going to measure the center line out to say 1.5 inches, and then this line out to say 2 inches right here. Same thing down on the other end. And it helps when you get to a point where you have to measure around the curves. It's kind of nice to have a flexible ruler. Do 1.5 inches here, so 3/4 out on each side. So this could change as you go too, so don't get too hung up on some of these measurements. This is just more kind of a baseline to go from. You may find that you have to do some adjustments as you go to get it where you want it. All we're going to do, we're going to take Tell you, drawing on a curved piece of wood with straight lines is like pushing a car uphill with a rope. Didn't even get that one. So make your lines nice and dark. You want to be able to see these. You're going to be shaping your entire bow based on these lines. By the time you're done, you're going to see exactly pretty much what your bow's going to look like. We're going to come down here to this fade out, the top of the fade out, and we're going to make a 2-inch mark. So we're going to go 1 inch on each side. So a little square is kind of handy at this point. I may have to settle for a block of wood square cut. So basically, I just want to make sure that this is square across here, just so everything's even. We're real scientific in the tools we're using. Okay. I'm just going to continue this line down. Same thing here. So this handle, since we're not doing a rest on it, I'm going to make this about 1 inch wide. But we're not going to immediately shave it to 1 inch because we're going to want to shape this to fit our hand. Now I'll get you guys a close-up of how this turns out. See if you guys can see this with some shaky camera work. So this would be the top limb of our bow, working down. That's mid-limb, that's where we start narrowing up to 1.5 inches. Down here at the beginning of the fade out, we end up at 2 inches. Down to 1 inch for the handle, which we're going to toy with that a little bit to get a good grip. Moving along to the bottom limb, it's pretty much a mirror image except for a slightly different length of the bottom limb's just a little bit shorter than the top limb. And go all the way up. So we can actually trim this stave down on both ends. We can trim it right there and we can start working this bow. So at this point, now that you have your bow drawn out on here, now you can go to work with the hatchet, get as much of this stuff, get it close to the line. Don't go so close that if you hit too hard with the hatchet or something, you're going to split things off. Now, the reason I kind of like this a little bit green is it is so much easier to work with the wood that way, and you're not hogging off huge points. Now, this is, like I said, this axe is flat all the way across, so I kind of use it the same idea that I would use my chisels. If I don't want to take too much material off, this is made for a right-hander, but I'm left-handed, and this actually works perfect for doing this because it gets it so I'm not biting in so deep. And all you're going to do, you try to keep it square. You're just going to work down close to your line. Now I'm going to have a lot of draw knife work to do, but with what I'm doing here, it kind of works out. And once you get used to doing this, you can really start making some time. You can get closer to your lines. So I'm out 1/8 of an inch from the line there, about 1/4 down there. And try to do it square as you can. It's hard to do that by eye. But this hatchet, even with the bevel on it being as messed up as it is, the bit being all pitted, this hatchet is perfect for this stuff. And I have the same rule with doing this as I do with cutting with a handsaw. Only take what you can see. Only work the lines that you can see. So we're within, already just that little bit of work, we're within 1/8 of an inch of that line, just about all the way. Don't get greedy with it. Take it to a point that you're comfortable working with it on your shaving horse and with your draw knife. And be careful around your handles and your fade outs, because it's going to be real easy. It's going to be really easy to take too much off there. So the fortunate part of this is this wood is really easy to work with like this. And you kind of want to stand over your work a little bit. Makes it a lot easier to see. So this right here, as I'm going into the handle, I want to flip it over and work it from both directions. And remember, I would rather have the hatchet tipped this way a little bit. I'm exaggerating for the camera, just so I don't bite in too far that way, going into my, where that handle's got to be. But take this stuff really easy. Keep working it back and forth, flip it over if you have to. This is not a race, you're not in a hurry. Getting in a hurry doing things like this that are supposed to be fun, you might as well not even do it. Like I said, I'll get this close and we're going to work most of this handle with the draw knife anyway. But the less material I have to take off with the draw knife, the better. Remember, again, we're only cutting what we can see. See how nice that just shaves off of there? This hatchet is a sweetheart for this stuff. So that's about as close as I want to get to this handle right now with this hatchet. I want to start on the lower limb on this. And I'm going to be a little more aggressive because this is the fat end. And being very careful not to get into that line right there. Let's get rid of that. And we're getting there. This end, this was right close to the ground, so this is going to be a little bit harder to work. Now you notice, like I said, you see how this hatchet kind of dives out when you try to go straight down? I would rather have that. It keeps me from going in way too deep. Now don't get too alarmed if you got a bunch of hatchet marks. That's all going to disappear. Well, we're getting there. Now again, I don't want this hatchet at all. I don't want any hatchet marks, any lines past this line. So a lot of this down here said we'll end up working that with the draw knife. We're getting a little closer there. There's nothing more relaxing than sitting down with your draw knife, your shaving horse, and just getting after it. So the way I want to hold this in my shaving horse is I want that back of that bow as level as I can where it's going to be. So as I take this down, I can kind of take it down perpendicular to that. So I want to start on one end and just very gently. You don't have to take off. Don't have to take off a ton. It's very easy. Take your time. And like I said, remember, most of this material right here, most of this is going away. What I'm basically trying to do is get a flat surface close to my line. I don't want to go all the way to the line because I want to have room to work it if I run into a problem. And when you get a nice flat surface on this one side to work with, it's going to make it a lot easier for laying it out as well. We're at a point now where we have pretty well the shape of the bow roughed out one way. Now we have to work on the belly of the bow, which is going to be the part of the bow that's facing you. This would be the back that's facing out. So all I'm going to do is I want to carry over my lines for my fade out, my handle, get those kind of as close to 90 degrees as I can across here. And then we want to kind of go from there. I want to have about a 1/2 inch line all the way down. Some people tell you 3/8. I'm going 1/2 inch just because I prefer to err on the side of caution in case I have a screw up. It's a little bit easier for me to deal with that screw up later on than if I take too much material. And that's with a lot of stuff we do, you know, just a matter of being careful. But you want all these lines, you want them to kind of line up. You want everything as it should be, if that makes any sense. I don't make any sense half the time when I talk. I think I'm just up here listening to myself. Kids think I'm nuts. The wife thinks I'm nuts. Half the internet thinks I'm nuts. Okay, maybe like a millionth of the internet. I know that's a little cocky there. So we got our handle line, our handle lines, and our fade outs. So I'm going to come down, and I'm real tight to my line here, so I'm comfortable measuring it. I'm going to come down my 1/2 inch on both sides. And I want about 1.25 inches out here. Should be about a comfortable handle. As close as we can here. And like I said, keep in mind, you can change this anytime you want. This is not set in stone. If you have a shape for your handle that you feel works better for you, by all means you should go with it. Everybody's a little different. Everybody shoots a little different. And keep in mind, like I said, these are rough measurements. They may not seem rough, but they are. There's nothing here that's, absolutely nothing here set in stone. I wish I hadn't to drink that pot of coffee. I'm jittering so bad. So from here, all we're going to do, we get this as close to our line as we can here. Some 1/2 inch marks all the way up. Remember, you're going to want to follow your contours. Now you could even, if you're comfortable with it, you can get your pencil on a line and you can kind of scribe it, and that'll get you pretty darn close. I'm going to hold that pencil about a 1/2 inch out, and that way too you're going to scribe with the shape of this bow all the way down. I can make my own fingers work. Now doing it this way, it is going to leave me with a lot more material to have to remove, but I don't mind that. Like I said, I'd rather err on the side of caution every time. Makes my life a lot easier that if I screw this up, I still have enough meat left I can take care of it. Some guys like Clay Hayes, he uses a compass doing stuff like this. I think he does this with his fingers also. That's not the most perfect line in the world, but it's going to get us in the ballpark. And believe it or not, you're going to be amazed at how thin these limbs are going to get by the time we're all said and done. So I want to flip it all over. The same thing on this side. I want to get a nice square line. Now you're probably thinking, how square can a block of wood be? Be surprised. If I could hold myself still, jeez. No more coffee late at night. You people should know better by now. Okay, we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to come up our 1¼ inch. If I can hold the darn thing straight. And lined up right. Come on. Same thing up here, 1¼ inch. And obviously we're not going to go right to our line on this at first, because I definitely want to make sure that I can adjust this handle as we go. It's kind of flopping all over the place on me. Not too bad. Stringy stuff. To get out of that heartwood, it gets a little bit easier to work. Just keep watching that line. That line is all important right now. Take little bites, little bites. This is where your patience, is going to start thinning down a little bit. Ooh, we're getting pretty decent there. All right, so at this point we have a really good shape going. We've roughed this out with the hatchet, and I've taken the time with the draw knife on this lower limb. I've taken the time to take it down to my line. So as you're looking at the back of the bow, that's the shape we're going to have. That's pretty much the final shape. There'll be a little bit of rounding, things like that. The handle, we have a lot of work to do on that. Don't know if you can see the lines, but we have quite a bit of meat to remove there. But what we're going to do, we're going to kind of save that for last, roughing out that handle. Now here, we have probably a good 3/16 to 1/4 inch of a material to remove all the way up this upper limb. That side's a little bit closer. What that's going to get us is that's going to get us our final shape, just like on the lower limb. And then we can start flattening out the back And once we have these sides shaved down, I'm going to redraw my layout lines right there. And then we're going to take it down to that 1/2 inch. And then we're going to start the long process of tillering and finalizing this thing. But in order for me to tiller this needs to dry a little bit. So probably what we'll do is we'll build a drying box of some kind, get a little bit of heat on it, dry it slow, a little bit here, a little bit there, let the wood relax, do what it's going to do. Now that shape we have, that kind of that curve, that's beautiful. But what we also have is a very slight propelling, just a little bit. That's easy enough to take out with a little bit of heat. So we're going to keep going and carry on. So this is getting easier and easier to work. You know, the piece is getting smaller, but I'm still in the roughing phase. And but it goes pretty quick, this part. You just have to be careful, like every other phase, not to bite in too far. And remember, if you start biting down, rotate your handles up, no matter what style draw knife you're using. This part goes quick. And if you're more comfortable, leave a little bit of the line. You can always use a little tiny hand plane to clean that up, and also your card scraper to get that where you want it. Now I could be doing long pulls right now, removing a lot more material. But I find that doing it the way I'm doing it, I'm just taking off a little bit at a time. And it's all about control. And see how we started digging up and I rotated that blade up. You got to really pay attention to the way your grain's running. And like anything else, if you can avoid grain run out on a lot of this, it's going to make it a lot easier. I mean, you're going to have spots where it's unavoidable just because of the nature of what you're shaping. But for this right here, we're doing pretty well. Believe it or not, this is a pretty fun process. A lot of people think, you know, oh, it takes too long, you're crazy, what are you doing? You know, like I've said in a lot of videos over the years, it's the process of making this stuff is what makes it great. It's not about ripping something like this out in a day. It's about just enjoying the feeling of using these tools, watching the wood come off, and knowing that you made something that's pretty cool that not everybody can make. It's not that not everybody can make it. I mean, anybody can make something like this if they want to take the time and the patience to do it. And like I've said before, same thing with the timber frames. Anybody can do it. It's a matter of taking the time to do it right and take your time. You know, not getting in a hurry, not trying to take too much material at once. Because that gets lost on a lot of people because everybody's in such a hurry. So after a few hours of messing around, having a good time, actually relaxing, we have the shape of a nice flat bow going. We're at the point now, we're going to lay these sides out again when we come back, and we're going to shave this down even more. We're going to get these limbs somewhere between 1/2 inch and 3/8, then hopefully we can start floor tillering. I can't go too far with it yet because it has some drying to do. It's not that bad. It was cut in the summer, like I said, so it's really not bad. The best part about this stave is that shape right there. That is the absolute best part about it. So yeah, we're going to get this thing really close to where it needs to be, and then we're going to let it dry, and then we're going to finish it off. And hopefully, I'm kind of hoping to be hunting with this later this year. You know, it's already hunting season. I'm getting kind of a late start, but it's going pretty well. I'm happy with it. It's hard to find bow staves that are this nice. If you're going out and cutting your own, you really want to pay attention to that tree. You want to pay attention to the way it's growing. Look at the bark. See how twisted the bark is. If that bark's really twisted, maybe try to avoid it. It's no different in selecting trees or timbers for anything. You're just, obviously they're not so big that it's like a timber frame or anything like that, but they're, you can tell a lot by the way a tree grows. Let's just put it that way. So like the piece of smooth bark hickory I have, it's like this, but it'll make a nice bow. I might be able to get 2 out of that, although that log is really small for it. It would have to be kind of a really narrow bow, a little bit deeper. But, and to be quite honest with you, I like working the shag bark much better. Not a lot of people out there, unless you're from the Northeast, not a lot of people are doing shag bark hickory bows that I see. When people say hickory bows, a lot of times they're talking about smooth bark hickory. And people don't know what they're missing. These make some really nice bows. My brother-in-law just built a beautiful one out of shag bark, and it's gorgeous. He did a recurve. And actually, I would love to get him on here sometime and maybe show that thing off, because he did just a gorgeous job with it. It was his first one too, and honestly, it's probably one of the nicest bows I've ever shot for smoothness, and it's very fast for being a self bow. I mean, it's got to be up there. I'd say maybe 170 feet per second, somewhere in there. It's really fast for a self bow, especially a first one. But he did it out of shag bark. He took his time. He did all his research. He did a great job. So, like I said, that's it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We will continue this series on the next video. You know, once in a while, it's nice just to do one for fun. I don't get to do that very often. Usually the videos I'm doing, it's stuff I'm working on out of necessity. But right now I had a couple halfway easy free days to where I could get this done. Now this is one evening. That's all this is. So it's not that bad. It's not as daunting as it would look. So it's like anything else you try to do. Get into it, take your time. It's a lot easier than it looks. I mean, it's not easy, but it is easier than it looks. So have a good night, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the next one.